Hey, I'm Jonny May from Piano with Jonny, and today I'm going to teach you 6 beautiful runs that you can play at the beginning and at the end of a jazz ballad. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Doesn't that sound beautiful? And jazz pianists will use these runs oftentimes at the beginning of a tune to set up the song, and they'll also use it at the end as they're kind of slowing down. They'll play this gorgeous run, and they'll end on a chord, okay? So I'm going to teach you 6 of my favorite runs. These are 6 of the most common runs, and I'm going to teach you the technique behind each run. We're going to talk about, first of all, what is the chord? How does this chord work? And then I'm going to show you each and every finger. We're going to really take our time. I show you my favorite fingering, and then I show you the techniques that you can use to speed up the run and to make it very smooth, because you want to have a nice smooth line. So I show you lots of ways you can practice it to get it more accurate. Then I'm also going to show you some resting places. Basically, when you end the song, you want to end on a really beautiful chord. And so I teach you 8 of my favorite resting places where you play that gorgeous run. I'll do it again here. Here's a different chord that I'm going to show you. And then you can end on these gorgeous, kind of jazzy chords. Here's another one. Okay? And then I'm also going to show you a run after you land on that chord that you can play at the very end, and it goes like this. Isn't that gorgeous? So you're going to learn a lot of great stuff in this lesson. I also teach you what I call a prep chord, where right before you play the run, that's the prep chord, and then you can do the run, okay? So a lot of great stuff in this lesson. This lesson is for intermediate piano players. So if you're an advanced piano player, you're going to be great. You're going to learn lots of stuff in this lesson. If you're a complete beginner, you just started, you might have a hard time with some of these concepts. But if you're on the later side of beginner and you want a little bit of a challenge, I think you might be able to handle this course just fine. Now in this mini course, I'm going to teach you a portion of the lesson, and you can find the full-length lesson on pianowithjonny.com. So let's go ahead and hop in. Okay, so before I go ahead and teach you each of these runs, I kind of want you to understand when you would play the run in the first place, okay? So each of these runs works over a dominant 7th chord. That's kind of the common denominator among all of these chords, okay? And so I'm going to be demonstrating all of these runs over a G7, okay? This is a G dominant 7th, and go ahead and play this with me. This is G, B, D, and F, okay? Now, dominant 7th chords typically are leading chords. They lead to another chord, okay? In this case, G7 leads to C, okay? This is a 5-to-1 relationship. This is very, very fundamental to Western harmony and jazz, but the 5 chord leads to the 1 chord, and if you make it a dominant 7th, a G with a 7, there's that resolution there, okay? So here's why these runs work over the beginning and the end of the song. It's because most songs start on the 1 chord, and they also end on the 1 chord, okay? For example, if you took a song like That's All, which is a classic jazz tune, okay? The song basically goes like this. Okay, so basically that melody, da, 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 we're coming in on the 1 chord, right? Which in this case is like a really, beautiful C major chord, okay? Now, if you take the end of the song goes like this. And that's the end of the song, okay? And you'll notice there, that's all, we land on this C6 chord, right? Which is also a variation on a C major, okay? So my point here is that most tunes start and end on that 1 chord, okay? So we've got this 5-to-1 relationship, so you can use that 5 chord that leads to the 1 chord at the beginning, and that 5 chord also leads to the 1 chord at the end. Okay, the next chord I want to teach you also before I teach you the runs, and actually you can make a run out of this chord, is what I like to call the prep chord. Okay, it sounds like this. Okay, now this chord is a G7. Okay, there's your 7th. It also has a 9 It also has a 11 in it, or you can think of it as a sus4, and it also has a 13, okay? The technical name of this chord is G13 with a sus4, okay? But the notes here are G, F, A, C, and E. You can also think of this as an F major 9 over a G, but it has this kind of sound to it where there's this anticipation, you know. What's gonna happen? And then we resolve, okay? So I call this a prep chord because it actually preps your G dominant 7th chord, okay? Basically, if I were to play a really jazzy G7, I'd play this, which is a G13, right? G, F, A, B, and E. And as you'll notice on the prep chord, it's just one note off. We're playing that C, which is the sus4, or the suspended 4th, right? And then that resolves down to the 3rd, okay? But what I want you to know here is we can actually use this chord to prep the next chord, which is the actual run, okay? Furthermore, you can also play a run on this prep chord before the next chord. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so basically what we're doing now is we're taking this chord and we're just playing it all the way up the piano. We're arpeggiating it up the piano, and I want to show you the fingering because I changed the fingering slightly, okay? So here is, I guess you could call this actually a run in and of itself, but you kind of want to hear you want to hear the dominant chord after this one, okay? So the fingering for this run, I go G, F, that's pinky, thumb, okay? And then I go A, C, E, and I use fingers, you know, thumb, index, and middle, okay? So it's the same chord that I just showed you, but new fingering. And this new fingering allows you to cross over to the F. You see that? There's my target note. And I use my index finger for the F, and then that just repeats. A, C, E, F, A, C, E, F, A, C, E, F, okay? Now it's really important, you know, speeding up these runs, you want it to be nice and smooth all the way up the piano, okay? So what I do in terms of speeding this up is I really look for that target note. That's the goal, you know? Because the right hand's pretty simple, it's just an A minor all the way up the piano, okay? But bam, if you can get to that target note quickly, right? So the way I like to practice this, I encourage my students to practice this, is just do it like, you know, 1 octave. So it'd be like that, right? Just try to get to that F real quick, okay? Once you get that, now expand it 2 octaves, right? Right? And then do it the full way up the piano. Okay. Okay, the last point I want to make about this chord, another way you can think of it is that it prolongs the G dominant 7th, okay? And in a way it creates a little bit more anticipation, right? You could go 5, 2, 1, right? That would be sounding great. But this way, you sort of wait on the dominant chord, okay? So it's a very useful progression. Let me show you an example of how I might use this. Once again, for That's All, it's a great tune. You might go like, okay, so I first went to the G13 sus4, and then I went to my beautiful G dominant 7th, and I'm going to be showing you these chords as well. So kind of think of it as prolonging this dominant chord, creating some anticipation. Okay, we're ready for the first run. Here's run number 1. I'll first play it for you and I'll break it down how it works. Here it is. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we're playing a G7, right? G root 7. And this is very typical in the left hand to have root 7 or 3-7. We're going to use root 7 for right now. So once again, G7 is our chord, G, F, and then the right hand, we get this beautiful chord actually. This is actually an E major chord in the right hand. The notes here are G sharp, B, and E, okay? So I kind of want to explain what this chord is, okay? There's a few ways of thinking of it. One, you could think of it as a G13 with a flat 9, okay? And basically what's happening is I'm playing root, 7, and 3rd. These are the most important notes of the chord. You're gonna pretty much always have these somewhere in your chord. And then we have some really colorful, beautiful notes. We have the A flat, which is the flat 9, and we have the E, which is the 13. You can also think of it as the 6th. Technically it's a 13 because of the way we structure this chord, but those are your notes, okay? The other way you can think of it is an E major triad, right? That's an E major triad over root 7, okay? Or if you do it higher, you can put it over your 3rd and your 7. That's also really beautiful if you have a bass player who lays that root down and you lay that down. It's just beautiful, okay? So the name of this chord is called an upper chord structure. That's the technical name of this technique that I'm using, upper chord structure. It's basically a major triad over, or it could be also a minor triad. It can have variations, but basically it's a major triad over a root and a 7, upper chord structure. Another term some pianists will use is polychord. Okay, it's like a polychord, you know, sort of 2 chords happening at the same time, okay? So that's the position, okay? Now when we do the run, we want all 3 of these notes, and we also want the 3rd and the 7th. Okay, that's kind of the rule for these runs, is to take the upper chord structure, and in addition to that, you want the 3rd and 7th. Now, the 3rd is already included in the chord. We got the B here, okay? So really the notes that we need for the run are the 7th and the upper chord structure. You see how that works? Okay, so that's kind of the first part. As you're figuring out each of these chords, what are the notes? The last point, actually, before I teach you the run, is this particular run is built on the 6th degree of G7, right? So G, A, B, C, D, E. E is the 6th. And so if you build a major chord on the 6th, there is your E major chord. There's your upper chord structure, okay? So as you're transposing this, let's say you wanted to do this run in another key, you know, you can figure it out by going up a 6th from the G, there's your E, and then you build a major triad, okay? So here we go. We're going to go back to the run itself. Here are our notes, okay? And now the fingering, this is the tricky part, okay? Because once again, we're crossing over. And when you cross over, you generally want to cross over to a black key if there is a black key, okay? It's harder to cross over to a white key and have your right hand hit a black key, because now your right hand is kind of moving up, it's kind of raised, and so that it's much more challenging. So when you're figuring out these runs, go for the black note, okay? So to accomplish this run, you'd voice it like this. See how that works? So now my left hand is going for that G sharp. And that's much easier to play, okay? So here's how it works. Right hand position is B, E, F. And that's just going to repeat all the way up the piano, B, E, and F, okay? Left hand is G sharp, B, E, and F. And you can actually just start here. Go G sharp, B, E, F, G sharp, B, E, F. And you can just do this all the way up the piano, okay? And once again, look for your target notes, right? Bam, you want that G sharp, right? And then do it 2 octaves. Right? And then do it 3 octaves. Right? Really work on getting that nice smooth run. The last thing that I like to do on this run is I go root 7 and I actually play the G sharp down here. Okay? It just sounds more full. I kind of like that better than going like up to your B here. Right? So the run that I use is G, F, right? G, F, G sharp, and then I start the run. Okay? The last thing is I sort of end this run on a G sharp up here. So you kind of finish with the crossover. Bam. Okay? And then from there you can either end the song or you can sort of start the song. But this is the general formula for each of these runs. Just keep in mind, they're usually major chords, and left hand is root 7, and then when you do the run, you want the 3 and the 7 with the upper chord structure. And so I'll be demonstrating all of these, but this is the sort of rule behind each of these runs. I actually want to make one more point here before I move on to the next concept. I actually want to demonstrate this in another key, just so you can kind of, understand how to put these chords together in other keys. Okay? For example, if I wanted to play this run, let's say I had a song in the key of E flat, right? This is my, root chord. In fact, if we took That's All, right? Okay, now we just took the same song and we put it in E flat, okay? So basically my 5 chord now is a B flat, right? Right, you could say like B dominant 7, right? So if I wanted to play this same run on B flat, it would go like this. Okay? And basically what I'm doing now is I'm applying that same formula. If you recall, I said, well, if you go up to the 6th degree, from the root, you can form that major chord, okay? And so in this case, B flat dominant 7th is the chord, so we walk up the B flat major scale, B flat, E flat, D, E flat, F, and G. There's the 6th of the scale, we form a G major chord, and that becomes the new upper chord structure to use, right? And so we can just bring that G major down here, we go root 7, right? Remember earlier I said you need the 3 and the 7. Here's the 7. There's your 3rd. You already got that in the chord. And then now you can just play this all the way up the piano. Okay? So that's the basic rule in figuring out these chords, in any key. If you wanted to do this in, for example, F major, right? It would be that. Okay? And the challenge becomes fingering. How do you play this in such a way to minimize the workload? You might want to do something like that, right? So kind of experiment in other keys forming each of these various chord positions. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about here is the intro, okay? So there's a couple ways that you can start a song. The most common way is to actually play the last few bars of the song, and then that usually takes you into the song, okay? And once again, in the case of That's All, which is this great jazz classic from the American Songbook, you actually, the melody goes, okay? And you can actually take the end of the song, right? And then start the song. Da, 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 right? See how that works? And this works for a lot of songs. The Way You Look Tonight, another classic song, right? If you take the end of that melody, right? Da, 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 da. Let's say you just take the last few bars. If you start here, that can be the intro of the song. Da, 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 dum. And then come down to the run. And then we start the song. Someday, right? Hey, I hope you enjoyed this mini course, and you can find the full-length lesson on pianowithjonny.com, as well as lots of other lessons for beginner, intermediate, and advanced piano players, as well as lots of sheet music of your favorite songs, so be sure to check those out on the website. Well, it was a lot of fun for me, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.